The hall smelled of cedar and smoke, mingled with something sharper. Fear, maybe. Or the kind of tension that settles into wood and stone when too many dominant personalities occupy the same space. I pressed myself against the far wall, trying to make my body smaller, less noticeable, as the other Omegas clustered near the fire. Their laughter rang hollow, performative, each of them angling for position even now, even after everything. I didn't belong here. I'd never belonged anywhere, really. But this sanctuary for the unwanted, the rejected, the broken, should have felt different. It didn't. My fingers worried at the frayed edge of my sleeve, a nervous habit I'd never managed to break. The fabric was thin, worn from too many washings, and I felt acutely aware of how I must look compared to the others. They wore their rejection like armor, transforming pain into sharp edges and sharper tongues. I just wore mine like a shroud. "Did you hear?" Cassidy's voice cut through the murmur of conversation, and despite myself, I looked up. She stood at the center of the group, red hair cascading over her shoulders like a declaration of war. "The Alpha King is coming here, tomorrow." The reaction was immediate: gasps, excited whispers, a few nervous laughs. I felt my stomach drop. "Why would he come here?" someone asked. "This is a sanctuary for rejected." "Exactly." Cassidy's smile was sharp. "His son, the pup. Apparently, he's been through 17 caregivers in 6 months. Nannies, tutors, even trained specialists from the capital. No one can handle him." She paused for effect, her eyes glittering. "They're getting desperate." My heart hammered against my ribs. The Alpha King. I'd heard stories, of course. Everyone had. Ruthless, powerful. A widower who'd lost his mate 3 years ago and hadn't been the same since. His son, born just months before her death, was said to be difficult. Dangerous, even, for one so young. "They're looking for someone here?" The question came from Mira, a slight Omega with dark circles under her eyes. "One of us?" Where else would they look? Cassidy's laugh was bitter. "We're expendable. If the pup hurts one of us, if things go wrong, well, who's going to complain about a rejected Omega?" The words landed like stones in still water, ripples of uncomfortable truth spreading through the room. No one argued. No one could. I turned away, moving toward the window where condensation had gathered on the glass. Outside, snow fell in lazy spirals, blanketing the grounds in white. This place, the sanctuary of second chances, they called it, though no one actually believed in second chances, sat at the edge of the kingdom, far enough from the capital that we could be forgotten. Most of us preferred it that way. My reflection stared back at me from the window, pale and insubstantial. Light hair fell around a face that had been called pretty once, before my pack alpha had rejected me for being too weak, too soft, too useless to carry on the bloodline. The memory still stung, even 2 years later. I'd been 19 when he'd cast me out, and I'd arrived here hollow, barely speaking for months. I'd learned to be invisible. It was safer that way. "They'll probably pick Cassidy," someone was saying. "She's the strongest here, or Veronica. She used to work with pups before." I let their speculation fade into background noise, pressing my forehead against the cold glass. Tomorrow, the Alpha King would arrive, and he would choose someone to care for his damaged son. It wouldn't be me. It was never me. And that was fine. I didn't want to be chosen, didn't want those cold, assessing eyes landing on me, seeing right through to all the broken parts I'd tried so hard to hide. The evening wore on. I helped prepare dinner in the kitchen, grateful for the excuse to avoid the increasingly frenzied conversation in the main hall. Speculation had turned to competition, and I wanted no part of it. By the time I retreated to my small room on the 3rd floor, my hands were shaking. I couldn't explain the dread that had settled in my chest like a stone. This wasn't my problem. This wasn't my future. I lay awake for hours, watching shadows dance across the ceiling, listening to the old building settle around me. Somewhere below, I could still hear voices, planning, scheming, hoping, always hoping that this time, this opportunity, would be the one to change everything. I'd stopped hoping a long time ago. Sleep came eventually, fitful and thin, full of dreams I couldn't quite remember, but that left me gasping awake in the dark hours before dawn. Morning arrived gray and cold, the kind of winter day that seemed to leach color from the world. I dressed carefully, choosing my least worn dress, still shabby but clean, and braided my hair with trembling fingers. Presentation mattered, the sanctuary's headmistress always said, even for those of us who'd been discarded, especially for us. The main hall had been transformed overnight. Someone had cleaned the windows until they gleamed, arranged chairs in neat rows, even put out flowers, hothouse roses that must have cost more than my monthly ration. The other Omegas were already assembled, each one groomed and positioned like pieces on a chessboard. I took a seat in the back row, hoping to disappear. "Straighten up," the headmistress hissed as she passed, her sharp eyes missing nothing. "Show some dignity." Dignity. As if any of us had that left. The sound of engines broke through the morning quiet. Large vehicles, multiple, coming up the long drive. My pulse kicked up despite my best efforts to remain calm. This was really happening. The doors opened, and a blast of cold air swept through the hall, carrying with it the scent of pine and something darker, heavier. Power, authority, the kind that made every Omega instinct in my body scream to lower my eyes, to submit, to make myself smaller. The Alpha King entered first. I'd expected someone older, harder. What I saw instead stole the breath from my lungs. He moved like violence barely contained, all lean muscle and controlled grace. Dark hair touched with silver at the temples, though he couldn't have been older than 35. His face was carved from stone, sharp cheekbones, a jaw that could cut glass, lips pressed into a line that suggested he'd forgotten how to smile. But it was his eyes that truly arrested me. Storm gray, cold and assessing. The eyes of someone who'd seen too much and felt too little. He swept his gaze across the assembled Omegas with the dispassion of someone evaluating livestock. Behind him came 2 guards, both built like walls, and between them, my breath caught. The pup couldn't have been more than 3 years old, but he moved with an aggression that seemed impossible for someone so small. His hair was the same dark shade as his father's, wild and uncombed, and his eyes, those eyes were already cold, already calculating. He wore clothes that had probably been expensive once but were now torn and stained. As I watched, he lunged at one of the guards, tiny teeth bared, and the man barely managed to catch him without getting bitten. "Enough, Sebastian." The Alpha King's voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of absolute command. The pup stilled immediately, going rigid in the guard's arms, but the rage didn't leave his small face. It was heartbreaking and terrifying in equal measure, a child who'd learned that violence was the only language anyone understood. The headmistress stepped forward, all false warmth and obsequious smiles. "Your Majesty, we are honored by your presence. As you can see, we have assembled our most capable. I'll choose myself." He cut her off without ceremony, already moving down the first row of Omegas. I watched him pause before Cassidy, saw the way she straightened, practically preening under his attention. He studied her for a long moment, then moved on. Veronica received the same treatment. Then Mira. One by one, he evaluated and dismissed them, his expression never changing. The pup, Sebastian, had gone eerily quiet, watching his father with an intensity that made my chest ache. Even in his rage, he was trying to understand, trying to anticipate. The Alpha King moved through the rows with methodical precision, and with each rejection, the tension in the room ratcheted higher. The Omegas he passed began to shift uncomfortably, confusion and hurt flickering across their faces. He was getting closer to the back row, closer to me. Every instinct screamed at me to look away, to avoid drawing his attention, but something, some perverse curiosity or maybe just exhaustion with hiding, made me raise my eyes as he approached. The world seemed to narrow to just that moment, his gaze meeting mine across the distance of 3 rows, something flickering in those gray depths that might have been surprise or recognition or nothing at all. He stopped walking. The silence stretched, pregnant with possibility and dread. I couldn't look away now, couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Then Sebastian made a sound, not quite a whimper, not quite a growl, and twisted in the guard's arms to see what had captured his father's attention. His eyes, so cold and hostile just moments before, locked onto mine, and something impossible happened. The pup went completely still, his small body relaxing for the first time since he'd entered the hall. His expression shifted, softened, became something achingly vulnerable. He reached out one small hand in my direction, fingers grasping at empty air. The Alpha King's eyes narrowed. He started walking again, but this time he was coming straight toward me, parting the rows of omegas like a ship through water. My heart hammered so hard I thought it might crack my ribs. He stopped directly in front of me, so close I could see the faint scar along his jaw, smell the winter and pine that clung to his clothes. Up close, he was even more overwhelming. Not just physically, though he towered over me, but in the sheer force of presence that seemed to radiate from him. "Stand," he said. My legs obeyed before my mind could catch up, and suddenly I was face to face with him, or would have been if I'd been brave enough to keep my eyes raised. Instead, I focused on the third button of his coat, noting absently that it was silver, that his coat was military cut, that I was definitely about to pass out. "Look at me." The command in his voice was undeniable. I raised my eyes slowly, fighting every omega instinct that screamed this was wrong, this was dangerous, this was... His expression hadn't changed, but something in his eyes had. Some flicker of... What? Interest? Assessment? What's your name? His voice was softer now, though no less commanding. "Emma." My voice came out barely above a whisper. "Emma Winters, Your Majesty." He studied me for another long moment, and I felt stripped bare under that gaze, as if he could see every weakness, every fear, every secret I'd tried to bury. Then he turned to the guard holding his son. "Bring him here." The guard approached cautiously, and I finally got a clear look at Sebastian up close. He was small for his age, I thought, and painfully thin. His clothes hung on a frame that should have been soft with baby fat, but was instead all sharp angles. But it was his eyes that truly broke my heart. Ancient eyes in a child's face. Eyes that had seen pain and loss and hadn't yet learned that the world could be anything else. He was still reaching toward me, that same desperate gesture, as if I were water and he were dying of thirst. "May I?" I asked softly, not sure if I was addressing the Alpha King or his son or both. The king nodded once, sharp and economical. I extended my hand slowly, carefully, the way you might approach a wounded animal. Sebastian practically launched himself from the guard's arms into mine, small hands fisting in my dress, face pressing against my shoulder with a force that spoke of desperation. He didn't bite, didn't growl, didn't fight. He just held on like I was the only solid thing in a world that had never stopped spinning. I felt tears prick at my eyes as I carefully wrapped my arms around him, supporting his slight weight. He was shaking. Or maybe I was. It was hard to tell where I ended, and he began in that moment. "How?" The Alpha King's voice was rough, raw in a way that suggested this single word cost him something. I shook my head slightly, unable to answer because I didn't know. I didn't know why this broken child had chosen me, why he'd finally gone still in the arms of the weakest, most rejected omega in the room. But I knew, with a certainty that terrified me, that nothing would ever be the same. The Alpha King stared at us for a long moment, and I could feel the weight of every eye in the hall boring into my back. Then he spoke, and his words sealed my fate. "You'll come back to the capital with us. Today." The journey to the capital took 6 hours, and Sebastian didn't let go of me once. He'd fallen asleep within the first 20 minutes, his small body finally surrendering to exhaustion, now that he'd found whatever it was he'd been searching for. I sat in the back of the massive vehicle, far more luxurious than anything I'd ever experienced, with a sleeping child in my lap and the Alpha King sitting across from us, watching with an intensity that made my skin prickle. I kept my eyes on Sebastian, studying the delicate features that were softer in sleep. Dark lashes fanned across pale cheeks, and his breathing had finally evened out into something peaceful. One small hand still clutched my dress. even in unconsciousness, as if afraid I might disappear. He hasn't slept through the night in 2 years. The Alpha King's voice startled me, quiet as it was. The doctors say it's trauma, night terrors. He wakes up screaming. I looked up cautiously, meeting those storm-gray eyes. Up close, in the filtered light of the vehicle, I could see the exhaustion etched into his face. Lines around his eyes, a tightness to his jaw that spoke of sleepless nights and impossible burdens. "I'm sorry," I said softly, not sure what else to offer. "Don't apologize." He leaned back, still watching us. "Tell me about yourself, Emma Winters." The headmistress's records were sparse. Of course they were. No one wanted to document the details of rejection, the reasons why someone had been cast aside. "There isn't much to tell, Your Majesty. I'm 21. I've been at the sanctuary for 2 years. I hesitated, then added quietly, "My former pack alpha found me inadequate, too weak to be of use." Something flickered across his face. Anger, maybe, or disgust. "Inadequate," he repeated, the word sharp on his tongue. "Yet you're the first person my son has willingly touched in over a year." The weight of that statement settled over me. A year. This child had been so lost in his pain that he'd rejected all comfort, all connection, for an entire year. "The last caregiver lasted 3 days," he continued, his voice taking on a clinical tone, as if reciting a report. "Before that, 5 days. The one before that made it 2 weeks, but only because she sedated him against my explicit orders." His jaw tightened. I fired her immediately. I looked down at Sebastian's sleeping face, imagining the parade of strangers who'd tried and failed to reach him. What happened to his mother? The temperature in the vehicle seemed to drop 10 degrees. The Alpha King's expression went carefully blank, but not before I caught a flash of something raw and devastating in his eyes. "That," he said quietly, "is not a story for today." I nodded, understanding that I'd touched something too painful to examine in the light. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have—" "You'll be staying in the royal quarters," he interrupted, changing the subject with the finality of someone who'd had a lifetime of practice controlling conversations. "Sebastian's room connects to a suite that will be yours. You'll have access to anything you need. Clothes, supplies, whatever you require." "I don't need much, Your Majesty." That wasn't a negotiation. There was no hostility in his tone, just statement of fact. "You're not a servant. You're not here to be invisible or to make yourself small. You're here because my son needs you, and that makes you one of the most important people in this kingdom. Do you understand?" I didn't. Not really. But I nodded anyway. The landscape outside began to change as we approached the capital, rolling hills giving way to larger estates, then to the sprawling city itself. Even through the tinted windows, I could see the grandeur of it, stone buildings that reached toward the sky, streets bustling with activity despite the cold, markets and shops and the general chaos of thousands of lives intersecting. The royal complex sat at the heart of it all, a massive structure of gray stone and soaring towers that had stood for centuries. Guards lined the approach, snapping to attention as our vehicle passed. I felt suddenly, acutely aware of how out of place I was, how impossible this all seemed. We pulled into a private courtyard, and within moments, staff appeared to open doors and assist with whatever it was that staff assisted with. I'd never had anyone serve me before. The thought made my stomach clench. "Let me take him," the Alpha King said, reaching for Sebastian. The moment his father's hands touched him, Sebastian's eyes flew open. For a heartbeat, I saw pure panic cross his small face, and then he was fighting, thrashing with surprising strength for someone so small. "No, no, no, no. Sebastian, don't want you, want her." His voice rose to a shriek, and I saw the Alpha King's face go carefully expressionless, but not before pain flickered across it, there and gone, but undeniable. "It's okay," I said quickly, adjusting my hold to support Sebastian better. "I've got him. It's okay." Sebastian buried his face against my shoulder again, his small body rigid with distress. The Alpha King stepped back, and for just a moment, I saw him clearly. Not a terrifying monarch or an all-powerful alpha, but a father whose son couldn't bear his touch. This way. His voice was flat now, emotionless. I followed him through corridors that seemed to stretch endlessly, each more opulent than the last. Paintings lined the walls, portraits of past rulers, I assumed, all of them staring down with the same cool authority. Staff members we passed pressed themselves against the walls, eyes downcast, and I realized they were all Omegas. Every single one. Finally, we reached a set of double doors that the king pushed open to reveal a suite of rooms that took my breath away. The main chamber was larger than the entire third floor of the sanctuary, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, furniture that looked like it belonged in a museum, and a warmth that spoke of fires already lit and rooms prepared. Sebastian's room is through there. The king indicated a door to the left. Yours is opposite. There's a connecting bathroom, and the nursery playroom is down the hall. You'll meet the rest of the household staff tomorrow, but for tonight, it's just you and him. He looked at his son, still clinging to me, and something in his expression cracked. Just slightly. Just enough for me to see the exhaustion and heartbreak beneath. Make him comfortable, he said quietly. That's all I ask. Then he turned and left, the doors closing behind him with a soft click that felt like finality. I stood in the middle of that enormous room with a traumatized child in my arms and no idea what I was supposed to do next. Hey, I whispered to Sebastian. Want to see your room? He nodded against my shoulder, still not letting go. His room was exactly what I'd expected and nothing like it at the same time. Yes, there were toys, hundreds of them probably, and a bed that looked like something from a fairy tale, and walls painted with murals of forests and stars. But there was also a darkness to it, a sense of disuse. The toys were pristine, untouched. The bed looked like it had never been slept in. This was a room designed for a child, but no child actually lived here. Where do you usually sleep? I asked softly. Sebastian finally lifted his head, his eyes red-rimmed and exhausted. He pointed to the closet. My heart broke a little more. I carried him to the closet and opened it carefully. Inside, someone had made a nest of blankets on the floor, tucked into the darkest corner. It was small and cramped, and probably felt safe in a way that big, open room never could. Okay, I said. That's okay. We all need our safe places. I settled onto the floor beside the nest, arranging Sebastian in my lap. He relaxed immediately, that same desperate relief flooding through him. I'm Emma, I told him quietly, and I'm going to stay right here with you, for as long as you need me. Okay? He nodded, thumb finding its way to his mouth, a gesture that seemed younger than his years, but was probably the only self-soothing mechanism he had left. We sat like that as the light outside shifted from afternoon to evening, and I hummed softly. Old songs my own mother had sung before she died, before everything fell apart. Sebastian's breathing evened out again, but this time I could feel the difference. This wasn't the sleep of exhaustion. This was trust. I must have dozed off, because I woke to find the room dark, except for a nightlight that cast soft shadows across the walls. Sebastian was still asleep, and I was stiff from sitting on the floor for hours. Carefully, so carefully, I tried to shift him onto the blankets of his nest. His eyes opened immediately, panic flooding his small face. I'm here, I said quickly. I'm right here. I'm not leaving. Promise. His voice was small, broken, the voice of a child who'd been promised things before and seen those promises shatter. I promise. And I meant it, even though I had no idea what I was promising or how I'd keep it. He studied my face in the dim light, searching for something. Whatever he found must have satisfied him, because he nodded and closed his eyes again. I managed to maneuver myself into the nest beside him, and he immediately curled into my side like a small animal seeking warmth. Within moments, he was asleep again. I lay there in the darkness of a closet in the royal quarters, holding a broken child who'd somehow decided I was worth trusting, and tried not to think about how badly this could all go wrong. The next morning arrived with soft light filtering through the crack in the closet door. Sebastian was already awake, watching me with those ancient eyes. Hi, I said softly. Hi. His voice was rough with sleep, but clearer than it had been yesterday. Are you hungry? He considered this, then nodded. Okay, let's see what we can find. I emerged from the closet to find that someone had left a tray of food on the table in the main room. Fresh fruit, pastries, juice, things that looked like they'd been chosen specifically for a child. There was also clothing laid out on the chair. Simple, comfortable things in my size, far better quality than anything I'd owned before. The bathroom was a revelation, all marble and gold fixtures, and a tub large enough to swim in. I helped Sebastian wash his face and hands, noting the way he flinched when I reached for him too quickly, how he watched the door like he expected someone to burst through at any moment. We ate breakfast in comfortable silence, and I noticed he kept glancing at me, as if checking to make sure I was still real. What do you usually do during the day? I asked. He shrugged, picking at a pastry. Nothing. Stay in my room. They try to make me do lessons, but I don't want to. What if we did something different today, just you and me? Suspicion flickered across his face. Like what? I don't know yet. What do you like? Another shrug, but this one seemed more helpless than defiant. I realized with a pang that he probably didn't know what he liked. He'd been too busy surviving to discover preferences. A knock at the door made us both jump. Sebastian's hand immediately found mine, squeezing tight. Come in, I called, trying to keep my voice steady. The door opened to reveal a woman in her 50s, gray hair pulled back in an efficient bun, wearing clothes that marked her as senior staff. Her eyes were kind but assessing. Miss Winters, I'm Margaret, the head of household. I've come to brief you on the daily schedule and introduce you to the rest of Sebastian's care team. I looked down at Sebastian, who'd pressed himself against my side. I thought it was just me. Well, yes. You're the primary caregiver now, but there are still tutors, doctors, specialists. No, Sebastian's voice was firm, final. Just Emma. No one else. Margaret's lips pressed into a thin line. Master Sebastian, your father has hired the best. I don't care. Just Emma. He looked up at me, and I saw the plea in his eyes, the desperate need to keep his world small and controllable. I looked at Margaret, trying to find a diplomatic solution. Perhaps we could start with just the two of us for a few days, let him adjust, then gradually introduce others. Margaret looked doubtful, but she nodded. I'll inform His Majesty of the arrangement. He's asked to see you both this afternoon, by the way, in his study, 2:00. After she left, I felt Sebastian relax slightly against me. You didn't let them make me, he said quietly. Make you what? Do things I don't want. Everyone always makes me. I knelt down so we were at eye level. Sebastian, I'm not here to make you do anything. I'm here to help you feel safe. And sometimes that means saying no to other people, even if they think they know what's best. His eyes widened slightly, as if this concept was entirely foreign to him. But, I continued gently, sometimes I might ask you to try things that are hard, not because I want to make you do them, but because I think they might help, and you can always tell me if something feels wrong. Okay? He studied me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. We spent the morning exploring his rooms, and I began to understand the scope of what I'd agreed to. This child had everything money could buy, and nothing he actually needed. Every toy was educational, every book was appropriate, every piece of furniture was safe and approved and utterly devoid of personality. What if we made this room yours? I suggested. Really yours. What would you want it to look like? Sebastian looked around as if seeing the space for the first time. I don't know. Well, what makes you feel happy, or calm, or safe? He thought about this, his small face scrunched in concentration. Stories, he said finally. When someone tells me stories, before Mom died, she used to tell me stories every night. There it was, the wound at the center of everything, the loss that had shattered this small person before he'd had a chance to become whole. What kind of stories did she tell? About brave people. People who were scared but did things anyway. His voice dropped to a whisper. She said I was brave too, but I'm not. I'm just scared all the time. I gathered him into my arms, and this time he came willingly. Being scared and being brave aren't opposites, Sebastian. Brave people are scared. They just don't let the fear stop them. He was quiet for a long moment, processing this, then, "Will you tell me stories, like she did?" "Every night," I promised. "As many as you want." By the time 2 o'clock arrived, my stomach was in knots. Facing the Alpha King in his study felt like walking into a lion's den, especially now that I'd essentially dismissed his carefully chosen team of experts. But Sebastian's hand in mine gave me courage I didn't know I had. The study was all dark wood and leather, books lining every wall, a massive desk dominating the space. The Alpha King stood at the window, looking out over the city, and didn't turn when we entered. "Your Majesty," I said softly. "We're here." He turned slowly, and I was struck again by the exhaustion in his face, the weight he carried. His eyes went immediately to Sebastian, and I saw the flicker of pain when his son pressed closer to me instead of running to him. "Margaret tells me you've dismissed the care team." His voice was neutral, but I heard the question underneath. "Not dismissed. Delayed. Sebastian needs time to adjust before—" "What Sebastian needs," he interrupted, "is structure, routine, professional care from people who know what they're doing." Something in me sparked at that, a flare of protective anger I hadn't felt in years. "With respect, Your Majesty, what Sebastian needs is to feel safe. And right now, a parade of strangers trying to fix him makes him feel the opposite of safe." The Alpha King's eyes narrowed dangerously, and I realized I just contradicted the most powerful man in the kingdom. Every instinct screamed at me to back down, to submit, to apologize. But Sebastian's hand tightened in mine, and I held my ground. For a long moment, the king just stared at me, and I could feel the weight of his dominance pressing down like a physical force. Then, unexpectedly, his expression shifted. Not quite a smile, but something that might have been respect. "You have 3 weeks," he said finally. "Show me that your approach works. If I don't see improvement, we do things my way. That's fair." "Is it?" A hint of dark humor touched his voice. "I don't recall asking your opinion." Heat flooded my cheeks, but before I could apologize, Sebastian spoke up. "Emma's right." His small voice was defiant. "I don't want the other people. They're mean." The Alpha King's attention snapped to his son, surprise flickering across his face. "Mean? Sebastian, no one has been mean to you." "They're mean inside," Sebastian insisted. "They smile, but they don't mean it. They just want me to be quiet and go away." The silence that followed was heavy with implication. The king looked at me, and I saw the question in his eyes. "Children can sense insincerity," I said quietly. "Sometimes better than adults." He nodded slowly, something shifting in his expression. 3 weeks, Miss Winters. Make them count." As we left the study, I felt the magnitude of what I'd taken on settle over me like a cloak. 3 weeks to heal a broken child. 3 weeks to prove that softness wasn't weakness, that being rejected didn't make me inadequate. 3 weeks to do the impossible. Sebastian looked up at me as we walked back to our rooms. "You weren't scared of him. I was terrified, but you didn't show it." He squeezed my hand. "That's brave, right?" I squeezed back. "Yeah, that's brave." The first week passed in a blur of small victories and setbacks that left me exhausted in ways I'd never experienced. Sebastian's trauma ran deeper than I'd imagined. He woke screaming most nights, refused to eat unless I ate first, and had panic attacks whenever anyone knocked on our door. But there were moments of light too. The first time he laughed at a story I told, the morning he chose to sleep in his bed instead of the closet, the afternoon he asked if we could go outside. That last request terrified me. "Outside?" I repeated, trying to keep my voice neutral. We'd barely left the suite in 7 days. "To the gardens. I used to go there with Mom." His voice was small, uncertain. "But I don't know if I remember how to get there." My heart squeezed. "We can find it together. Would you like that?" He nodded, but I saw the fear in his eyes, the same fear I felt. The suite had become our sanctuary, and leaving it meant facing the rest of the world. We dressed carefully, Sebastian in warm clothes that actually fit him now. I'd requested adjustments after noticing how everything hung on his thin frame. I chose one of the simple dresses that had been provided, still unused to having options, still uncomfortable with anything that drew attention. The corridors felt different in daylight, less oppressive but more exposed. Staff members we passed stopped and bowed, their eyes curious and assessing. I felt their judgment like a physical weight. Who was this rejected Omega walking through the royal quarters like she belonged? Sebastian's hand tightened in mine with each person we encountered, and I found myself drawing him closer, a protective instinct I hadn't known I possessed. The gardens, when we finally found them, took my breath away. They sprawled across the southern grounds, a masterpiece of design even in winter. Snow covered most of the paths, but someone had cleared walkways between dormant flower beds and bare trees that would probably be spectacular in spring. At the center stood a greenhouse, its glass panels catching the weak sunlight. "There," Sebastian whispered, pointing to the greenhouse. "That's where we used to go." We walked slowly, and I noticed how his breathing had changed. Quicker, shallower. Memories were surfacing, bringing pain with them. Inside, the greenhouse was warm and humid, filled with plants that defied the season outside. Orchids bloomed in impossible colors. Vines climbed toward the glass ceiling, and the air smelled of earth and growth, and something sweet I couldn't identify. Sebastian stopped in front of a particular section of white roses, his small face crumpling. These were her favorites, his voice cracked. She said they meant new beginnings, that even when things were hard, something beautiful could grow. I knelt beside him, not touching, just present. She sounds like she was very wise. I can't remember her voice anymore. The words came out choked. I try, but it's gone. And sometimes I can't remember her face unless I look at pictures, and that makes me so angry I want to break things. Oh, Sebastian, everyone says I should be over it, that it's been 3 years and I need to move on and be strong. His hands had curled into fists. But I don't know how. I don't know how to be anything except scared and angry. I reached out slowly, telegraphing the movement, and pulled him into my arms. He collapsed against me, not crying. He seemed beyond tears, just shaking with the force of emotions too big for his small body. "You don't have to be over it," I said firmly, "and anyone who tells you otherwise is wrong. She was your mother. You're allowed to miss her forever." "Really? Really? And being scared and angry? That's okay too. Those feelings are trying to protect you." "They're not bad, Sebastian. They're just really, really loud right now." We sat like that among the white roses for a long time, and I thought about my own losses, my own anger that I'd learned to bury so deep it had nearly suffocated me. Maybe healing wasn't about getting over things. Maybe it was about learning to carry them differently. "Emma?" His voice was muffled against my shoulder. "Yeah? Do you think my dad misses her too?" The question surprised me with its insight. "I think he probably does. Very much. Then why doesn't he ever talk about her? Why does everyone act like she never existed?" I had no answer for that, at least not one that wouldn't overstep my place. But I filed the question away, sensing it was important, a key to understanding both father and son. We stayed in the greenhouse until Sebastian's breathing had steadied and some of the tension had left his small shoulders. On the way back, we encountered fewer staff members, and I was grateful for it. Until we rounded a corner and nearly collided with the Alpha King himself. He stopped abruptly, and I saw surprise flicker across his face before it smoothed into that careful neutrality he wore like armor. "Sebastian. Miss Winters." His eyes moved between us, taking in our disheveled appearance. Sebastian's red-rimmed eyes. "Is everything all right?" "We went to the gardens," Sebastian said quietly, and I heard the challenge in his voice, the expectation of being told he shouldn't have, but the king just nodded slowly. "The greenhouse?" "Yeah, to see Mom's roses." Something passed over the Alpha King's face. Grief, maybe, or regret, there and gone so quickly I might have imagined it. "They're beautiful this time of year," he said quietly. Then, after a pause, "She would have liked knowing you still visit them." Sebastian's eyes widened, as if shocked to hear his father speak of his mother at all. "You remember which ones were her favorites?" "The white ones." She filled our rooms with them when you were born. Said you were her new beginning." The king's voice was rough, and I saw his hands clench at his sides. "I'm sorry I don't speak of her more often. It's difficult. For me too," Sebastian whispered. They stared at each other, father and son, separated by 3 feet and an ocean of grief neither knew how to cross. I felt like an intruder in this moment, but Sebastian's hand was still in mine, anchoring him. The Alpha King's eyes shifted to me, and I saw something in them I hadn't expected. Gratitude, maybe, or just bone-deep exhaustion. "Margaret tells me Sebastian has been sleeping better. Some nights are better than others," I said carefully. "But yes, overall, there's been improvement. And eating? He's starting to. It takes time." The king nodded, but I saw the frustration underneath. A man used to problems having solutions, to commands being followed, struggling with something that couldn't be fixed through sheer force of will. "Your Majesty," I said before I could stop myself, "may I ask you something?" His eyebrow raised slightly. "You may ask. When was the last time you spent time with Sebastian? Not checking on him or giving orders, but just being with him?" The silence that followed was arctic. I'd overstepped badly, and I knew it. But the question hung in the air between us, impossible to ignore. "I'm very busy," he said finally, his voice cold. "Running a kingdom requires—" "I understand. I just think—" I took a breath, steadying myself. "I think Sebastian might need his father as much as he needs me, maybe more. He can't stand my presence, you've seen it yourself, because he's scared. Not of you, of losing you too. It's easier to push you away than to risk caring and having you disappear." The words landed like stones, and I watched the Alpha King's expression shift through several emotions, before settling on something that might have been pain. "You presume to understand a great deal, Miss Winters. I only understand what it's like to lose people and be too afraid to let anyone close again." My voice was quiet but steady. "Sebastian and I have that in common." He studied me for a long moment, and I forced myself to hold his gaze even though every instinct screamed to look away. "Dinner," he said finally. "Tonight, the 3 of us, in the private dining room." Sebastian's hand tightened in mine, but before he could protest, I squeezed back gently. "We'd be honored, Your Majesty." After he walked away, Sebastian looked up at me with something like betrayal in his eyes. "Why did you say yes? I don't want to have dinner with him, I know. But sometimes the things we need most are the things we're most scared of. That doesn't make sense. Not yet, but it will." That evening, getting Sebastian ready for dinner felt like preparing for battle. He fought me on the clothes, the timing, everything. But underneath the resistance, I sensed the real emotion. Hope. He hoped his father would see him, really see him, and he was terrified of being disappointed again. The private dining room was smaller than I'd expected, intimate even, with a table set for 3 and candles casting soft light. The Alpha King was already there, and I noticed he'd changed from his formal attire into something simpler, more approachable. "Sebastian," he said as we entered, and I heard the careful control in his voice. "Thank you for joining me." Sebastian said nothing, pressing against my side. Dinner was awkward at first, full of stilted conversation and long silences. But then the king started telling a story about Sebastian's mother, how she'd once sneaked out of a state dinner to rescue a cat stuck in a tree, returning covered in leaves with the cat tucked inside her formal gown. Sebastian's eyes went wide. "Really? Really?" She was furious with me for laughing, but she couldn't stop smiling. The king's expression softened. That was the night I knew I loved her, not because she was graceful or proper, but because she was fearlessly, stubbornly kind. I don't remember that story. There are hundreds of stories. Maybe I could tell you more of them, if you'd like. Sebastian looked at his father like he was seeing him for the first time. Not as a distant figure of authority, but as someone who'd loved and lost just like he had. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I'd like that." Something in the room shifted, subtle, but unmistakable. A crack in the wall between them, small, but significant. When we finally returned to our suite that night, Sebastian was quiet, thoughtful. As I tucked him into his bed, the actual bed, not the closet, he looked up at me. "Emma, do you think things can get better, really better?" I thought about that broken child I'd met a week ago, and the boy in front of me now who'd laughed at dinner, who'd listened to stories about his mother without breaking, who'd fallen asleep without nightmares the night before. "Yeah," I said softly. "I really do." 2 weeks into our arrangement, everything changed. It started with a simple request from Sebastian. He wanted to meet the other children in the palace. Staff children. He'd heard them playing in the courtyards, and for the first time since I'd arrived, he was curious about the world beyond our careful bubble. I should have been more cautious, should have consulted the Alpha King first, gotten permission, prepared better, but Sebastian's eyes had been so hopeful, and I'd been so proud of his progress, that I simply said yes. The courtyard was bustling with activity when we arrived, children of various ages playing in the snow, their laughter echoing off stone walls. Sebastian's hand tightened in mine, but he didn't pull back. "You can just watch if you want," I told him. "No pressure." We stood at the edge for several minutes, and I noticed how the other children had started to take notice of us. Whispers spread, fingers pointed. The Alpha King's son. The strange Omega nobody. A boy about Sebastian's age approached, bold in the way only children can be. "Want to play?" Sebastian looked up at me, uncertainty written across his small face. "Do you want to?" I asked softly. He nodded, barely perceptible. "Then go ahead. I'll be right here." I watched him take those first tentative steps toward the other children, saw the way he hesitated before accepting the toy soldier the boy offered. Within minutes, he was kneeling in the snow with 3 other children, building something that might have been a fort. Pride swelled in my chest. This was what healing looked like. Small moments of bravery, choosing connection over safety. I was so focused on Sebastian that I didn't notice the woman approaching until she spoke. "You must be the miracle worker everyone's talking about." I turned to find a woman in her 30s, elegantly dressed. Dark hair swept up in an intricate style. Her smile was pleasant, but her eyes were calculating. "I'm just helping where I can," I said carefully. Modest, too. How refreshing. She extended a hand. "I'm Vivian. My husband serves on the King's Council. That's my son Thomas playing with Sebastian." I shook her hand, noting the strength in her grip. "Emma." "Oh, I know who you are. Everyone does. The rejected Omega, who somehow tamed the untamable child." Her tone was light, conversational, but I heard the edge underneath. "Tell me, how does it feel to go from nothing to living in the royal quarters?" Heat crept up my neck. "I'm just here for Sebastian." "Of course you are." Her smile never wavered, though I imagine it must be quite the change from that sanctuary. I hear those places are rather grim. Before I could respond, raised voices cut through the courtyard's pleasant atmosphere. I turned to see Sebastian backing away from a larger boy, his small face white with fear. "Freak," the boy was saying, loud enough for everyone to hear. "My dad says your mom died because she was ashamed of you. Says you're cursed." Everything seemed to happen in slow motion. Sebastian's eyes went wide, then dark with rage. His small body tensed, and I recognized the signs. He was about to explode, about to hurt someone or himself or both. I was moving before conscious thought, crossing the courtyard in seconds. But Vivian was faster. She grabbed the larger boy, her son, I realized, by the arm. "Thomas, apologize immediately." But the damage was done. Sebastian was shaking, fists clenched, tears streaming down his face. The other children had backed away, frightened by the intensity of his reaction. "Sebastian," I said softly, kneeling in front of him. "Look at me. Just me." His eyes found mine, wild and hurt. "Breathe with me. In," I demonstrated, and after a moment he mimicked me. "And out. That's it. You're okay." Safe. He said Mom was ashamed of me. His voice cracked. He said I'm cursed. He's wrong. He's completely wrong, and he's going to apologize. I don't want his apology. I want... His face crumpled. "I want my mom." I pulled him into my arms, holding him while he sobbed, aware of every eye on us. Vivienne was reprimanding her son, but the words felt hollow. The other children were being ushered away by their caregivers, and I felt the weight of failure pressing down on me. I'd pushed too hard, too fast. In my eagerness to help Sebastian grow, I'd exposed him to cruelty he wasn't ready to face. "Come on," I whispered. "Let's go home." He clung to me as I carried him back through the palace corridors, oblivious to the stares and whispers that followed us. By the time we reached our suite, he was exhausted, his tears spent. I settled him on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, and made him tea with honey, something my own mother used to do when the world felt too heavy. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I ruined everything." "You didn't ruin anything. That boy was cruel, and you reacted like anyone would. But I was supposed to be better, to be normal." He looked at me with those ancient eyes. "That's what this is all about, right? Making me normal so Dad doesn't have to be ashamed of me too?" The words hit like a physical blow. "Sebastian, no. Your father isn't ashamed of you." "Then why doesn't he want to be around me? Why does he need you to fix me before he can love me?" I had no answer. No way to explain the complexity of grief and fear and protective distance that the Alpha King had built around himself. Sebastian was right in the way children often are. Cutting straight to the painful truth adults tried to avoid, a knock at the door made us both tense. Before I could respond, it opened to reveal the king himself, his expression thunderous. I heard what happened. His voice was controlled, but I heard the fury underneath. Why was my son in the public courtyard without security, without prior approval? I stood, positioning myself slightly in front of Sebastian. He wanted to play with other children. I thought, "You thought wrong." He moved into the room, and I felt the full weight of his dominance pressing down. "You're here to care for him, not make decisions about his security and exposure." "With respect, Your Majesty, he can't heal if he's locked away from everything. He can't heal if he's traumatized by cruel children either." His eyes were hard. "This is exactly what I was afraid of. You're too soft, too inexperienced. You don't understand the dangers." Something in me snapped. "No. What I don't understand is how you think protecting him from everything will help him learn to face anything. Yes, today was hard. Yes, he got hurt. But he also played with other children for the first time in years." He laughed. "He tried. And now he's crying on the couch because someone told him his mother was ashamed of him." The king's control was slipping, his voice rising. "How is that progress? Because he's feeling it instead of burying it. Because he's learning that pain doesn't have to destroy him." I stepped forward, matching his intensity even though I was shaking. "You want to keep him safe by keeping him isolated, but all you're doing is teaching him that the world is too dangerous to face, that he's too broken to be part of it. You know nothing about keeping someone safe. And you know nothing about healing." The words were out before I could stop them. "You lost your mate, and instead of grieving with your son, you locked yourself away and hired strangers to feel for you, to hurt for you. Well, I'm sorry, but Sebastian needs more than a father who's too afraid of his own pain to acknowledge his son's." The silence that followed was absolute. I'd gone too far, said things that couldn't be unsaid. The Alpha King's face had gone pale, then red, emotions warring across his features. "Get out." His voice was quiet, deadly. "Pack your things and be gone within the hour." "No." Sebastian's voice cut through the tension. He'd thrown off his blanket and was standing now, small fists clenched at his sides. "She doesn't leave. If she leaves, I'll—" He struggled for words. "I'll be worse than before. I'll break everything. I'll never talk to you again." The king looked at his son, and I saw the devastation on his face, the recognition that even threats of self-destruction weren't enough to bridge the gap between them. "Sebastian, I'm trying to protect you. I don't need protection. I need someone who understands." Sebastian's voice broke. "Emma understands. She knows what it's like to be broken and scared. You just want me to be fixed so you don't have to look at me and remember Mom." The truth hung in the air between them, ugly and undeniable. The Alpha King's eyes found mine, and for just a moment, I saw past the armor to the man underneath, lost, grieving, terrified of failing the one person who mattered most. 2 weeks. he said finally, his voice rough. You have 2 more weeks, but no more unsupervised outings, no more decisions without consulting me first. Understood, Your Majesty. He turned to leave, paused at the door. And Miss Winters? Don't presume to know what I feel or don't feel. You may understand my son's pain, but you know nothing of mine. After he left, Sebastian collapsed back onto the couch, emotionally spent. I sat beside him, and he immediately curled into my side. Did I make it worse? He asked quietly. No, sweetheart. You told the truth. Sometimes that makes things worse before they get better. Will Emma have to leave? Not yet. We still have time. But what if time isn't enough? I held him close, breathing in the scent of his hair, feeling the weight of all my failures and all my hopes pressing down. Then we'll figure something else out, together. The final week arrived with the weight of inevitability. Sebastian had retreated into himself after the courtyard incident, and despite my best efforts, I could feel him slipping away. The Alpha King had become a ghost, present in the palace but absent from our lives, his silence more damning than any words. I was failing. We both knew it. On the 5th day, Margaret knocked with a message. The king requested my presence in his study. Alone. I found him standing at the window again, his posture rigid with tension. He didn't turn when I entered. Sebastian had another nightmare last night. It wasn't a question. Yes, Your Majesty. Margaret heard him screaming from 2 corridors away. He finally turned, and I saw the exhaustion etched deep into his face. 3 weeks, Miss Winters. That was our agreement. Tomorrow marks 3 weeks, and my son is no better than when you arrived. That's not true. He's what? Playing with other children? That ended in disaster. Sleeping better? He woke up screaming about his mother dying and me not caring. His voice was flat, emotionless. You promised me progress. I see none. Something inside me cracked. You're right. I've failed. But not because I'm too soft or inexperienced. I've failed because I can't fix what's broken between you and your son. Only you can do that, and you won't. I've given him everything. Except yourself. The words burst out of me. You give him money, security, staff, specialists, everything but the one thing he actually needs. You. His father. The person who loved his mother as much as he did, and understands what he lost. The Alpha King's jaw clenched. Every time I look at him, I see her. Every feature, every expression. Do you have any idea what that's like? To love someone so much that even their absence destroys you? No, I said quietly. But I know what it's like to be abandoned by someone who was supposed to protect me. To believe that my pain was too much, too inconvenient, too difficult to deal with, and that's exactly what you're doing to Sebastian. He moved toward me then, and I saw anger flash in those gray eyes. You presume too much. Maybe. But someone has to tell you the truth. I held my ground even as my knees shook. Your son thinks you don't love him. He thinks his mother's death was his fault, and that you can't stand to be near him because he reminds you of what you lost, and every day you avoid him, every moment you choose distance over discomfort. You prove him right. Get out. No. The word surprised us both. Not until you hear this. Tomorrow you can fire me. You can bring in every specialist in the kingdom. But unless you face your own grief and learn to be present with your son's pain, nothing will change. He doesn't need me. He needs you. The silence stretched between us, heavy with years of unspoken words and buried feelings. Then, unexpectedly, the Alpha King's shoulders sagged. I don't know how, he said, and his voice was broken in a way I'd never heard. Every time I try to reach for him, I freeze. What if I make it worse? What if I say the wrong thing? What if he sees me break and loses the only parent he has left? My anger dissolved into something softer. He's already lost you. You're alive but absent, and that's worse than any grief. At least grief is honest. He looked at me then, really looked, and I saw the man beneath the crown, terrified, drowning, desperately trying to hold everything together while falling apart inside. Tell me what to do. Start with the truth. Tell him you miss his mother too, that you're scared, that you don't know how to be what he needs but you want to try. I took a breath. And stop punishing yourself for still being alive when she's not. Something shifted in his expression. Recognition, maybe. Or the first crack in a dam that had held too long. Will you help me? The question was quiet, vulnerable. Not as his caregiver, as, I don't know, a guide. I'll help however I can, but this conversation has to be between you and Sebastian. I can't fix your relationship, only you can build it. He nodded slowly, then looked at me with something new in his eyes. Not just gratitude, but respect. I misjudged you, Emma Winters. Your former alpha was a fool. Heat crept up my neck. Thank you, Your Majesty, Damon, he said quietly. When we're alone, you can call me Damon. That evening, Damon came to our suite just as I was putting Sebastian to bed. My heart raced as I opened the door, hoping I hadn't pushed too hard, hoping this wouldn't end in more pain for the child who'd already suffered too much. Sebastian, Damon said, his voice careful. May I come in? Sebastian looked at me, uncertainty written across his face. I nodded encouragingly. Okay, he said quietly. Damon entered slowly, sitting on the edge of Sebastian's bed with an awkwardness that was almost endearing. For a moment, neither spoke. I need to tell you something, Damon finally said, and I need you to listen, even if it's hard. Sebastian nodded, pulling his blanket tighter. I loved your mother more than I thought it was possible to love anyone. When she died, something in me broke, and instead of letting myself feel that pain, instead of sharing it with you, I buried it. I threw myself into work and responsibility, and anything that would keep me from having to face the emptiness. He paused, his voice roughening. I thought I was protecting you. I thought if I kept everything running smoothly, if I provided everything you needed, that would be enough. But I was wrong. Sebastian's eyes were wide, fixed on his father. You don't remind me of what I lost, Damon continued. You remind me of what I still have, what I've been too afraid to reach for because losing you would destroy me completely. So I kept my distance, told myself it was safer, better. But all I did was abandon you when you needed me most. You were scared? Sebastian's voice was small, terrified. I still am. Damon's hands were clenched on his knees, but Emma helped me understand something. Being scared doesn't mean I get to run away. Not from you. Never from you. I'm scared too, Sebastian whispered. All the time. I know. And I should have been there to help you through it. To tell you that your mother's death wasn't your fault. That she loved you more than anything. That she'd be so proud of the brave boy you're becoming. Something broke in Sebastian then. He launched himself at his father, small arms wrapping around Damon's neck, and Damon caught him, holding tight as Sebastian finally cried against his father's shoulder. Not the screaming nightmares or angry outbursts, but deep, cleansing sobs of grief that had been trapped too long. I miss her so much, Sebastian choked out. And I missed you too. I'm here now. I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere. Damon's voice was thick with his own tears. I promise, Sebastian. I promise. I backed toward the door, giving them privacy, but Damon's voice stopped me. Stay. Please. He looked at me over Sebastian's head. You're part of this too. So I stayed, sitting in the chair near the window, and watched father and son finally begin to heal the wounds that had festered between them. Damon told stories about Sebastian's mother. Not the sanitized versions meant for public consumption, but real memories full of laughter and imperfection and love. Sebastian asked questions he'd been too afraid to voice before, and Damon answered with an honesty that must have cost him dearly. Hours passed. Sebastian eventually fell asleep in his father's arms, peaceful in a way I'd never seen. Damon looked up at me, and I saw gratitude and something else in his eyes, something that made my breath catch. Thank you, he said softly, for not giving up on us. I just helped you find what was already there. No, you did more than that. He adjusted Sebastian carefully, settling him under the covers. You showed me that strength isn't about never breaking. It's about having the courage to feel everything and keep going anyway. He stood, moving toward me, and suddenly the space between us felt charged with something I didn't dare name. Emma, he said, and my name on his lips sent shivers down my spine. These past 3 weeks, watching you with Sebastian, seeing your compassion and bravery. You've reminded me that there's still beauty in this world. Still reasons to feel. Your Majesty. Damon. Damon, I corrected, my voice barely above a whisper. I'm just a rejected Omega. I'm not... You're extraordinary. His hand reached up, fingers gently tucking a strand of hair behind my ear. And whoever rejected you was a blind fool who didn't deserve you. The air between us was electric. I should step back, I knew. This was dangerous territory, but I couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. Couldn't do anything but stare into those storm-gray eyes and wonder if this was real. I should go, I finally managed. Yes, he agreed, but neither of us moved. Then, slowly, carefully, giving me every opportunity to pull away, he leaned down and pressed his lips to my forehead. Gentle, chaste, but full of promise. Sleep well, Emma Winters. The next morning, everything felt different. Sebastian woke without nightmares and actually wanted to have breakfast with his father. Damon arranged his schedule to spend the morning with us, and I watched in wonder as they built towers with blocks and read stories and simply existed together without the weight of grief crushing them. By afternoon, Damon had to attend to kingdom business, but he promised to return for dinner. Sebastian barely protested, a miracle in itself. Emma? Sebastian said as we settled into the playroom. Are you going to stay now, since Dad isn't going to send you away? I smiled, pulling him close. If you want me to. Forever? Forever. The word echoed through me, full of possibility and hope and the terrifying prospect of belonging somewhere again. Let's start with today, I said gently, and see where it leads. But that night, as we all sat together at dinner, Sebastian chattering happily, Damon's eyes finding mine across the table with warmth that made my heart race, I understood something profound. I'd come here broken and rejected, convinced my weakness made me worthless. Instead, I discovered that my softness was strength, my empathy was power, my capacity to feel deeply and love fiercely wasn't a flaw. It was exactly what this family needed. And maybe, just maybe, I'd found the place where I finally belonged.